Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be taking you through the initial steps that I am working on with Fenway and his harness training. He is very skeptical about the harness going over his head, so this is something that we've had to work on. Now, what you're seeing right here is a previous clip of where I got to with him. I'm teaching him to stick his own head through and then I loop it over his head. This is where we got to a few weeks ago in our training, and then after this point he was doing so well with it that I went and I put it fully on him. He voluntarily stuck his nose into it and then I put it fully on him, and at that point he became extremely uncomfortable about it again. So fast forward to now this clip. This is a totally unedited clip of my latest training session using this harness with him. And you guys can kind of see the difference between his attitude in the previous clip that you saw and these clips here. Now, I'm taking quite a few steps back here and showing you the beginning processes of how I work this up. So again, this is a dog that is very nervous and very skeptical, and was very skeptical from the get-go of his harness. So this is something that's going to be helpful for those dogs at home that display these similar type of behaviors. I'm starting with the harness just being on the ground and tossing treats close to it, tossing treats away from it, getting him just comfortable moving around the harness. Now you're going to see me speed this up a little bit because he's used to that step. I tossed a treat away and then went to go pick the harness up off of the ground. I would recommend doing this if your dog is nervous of the harness. Make sure that they are away from it as you go to pick it up off of the ground. Now what I'm doing is I am rewarding him for just being there and being present and choosing to engage with me while I'm holding the harness up. I am also tossing food directly through the hole of the harness where he eventually is going to put his head. And here I'm going to start to advance to, he's looking very comfortable and he's approaching me every single time. So I'm going to start to advance to actually hand feeding him through the head hole of this harness as well. That's a good next step to do. If your dog at any point becomes uncomfortable with these next steps, go back down a step. This is something that I would work on in small steps for a longer period of time. Whatever your dog needs to be comfortable, before moving on to the next step, make sure that your dog is comfortable with the current step. And by tossing food away, you can know if your dog is comfortable. If you toss a treat away and they choose not to reapproach you with the harness, that means they are uncomfortable, they are done. Fenway has absolutely done that with training sessions in the past with this, but he is choosing to come back up to me every single time. So using treats tossed away can give you a really good gauge of how your dog is feeling about all of this. So what I'm starting to do here now is actually move into more of a shaping type of concept. So I'm choosing to say yes and rewarding him whenever he makes very small movements forwards towards the hole of the harness. Now this is where you see that vast difference between that last clip that I showed you and this one. This was all because I went a little bit too fast with him and I put the harness fully on him when I thought he was ready for that, but it turns out he was not. So we regressed in training a little bit, and that's going to happen with your dogs at home. It's okay if that happens. Just take a few steps back in your training plan and work up a little bit slower than that. So with Fen here, I'm saying yes and treating him whenever he makes any single forward motion towards the harness, no matter how small. Now what's important here is I am encouraging him to move his head closer towards me. I'm starting to present the harness to him, so there's a little bit of forward motion, but I'm not going to place it over his head without his consent. And I don't have his consent at this point. He's starting to back away just a little bit, so I go back and start to toss food instead of hand feeding. And he chooses to reapproach me again, which tells me that he's comfortable, but toss food as breaks for your dog can also serve you really well. And what I'm ultimately aiming for here with him is to get him to continuously eat food out of my hand while he is sticking his nose through the harness. I want to get most of his nose and part of his face through the harness before I even start to go to put it all the way over his head. If I were to try to do that now, he would back away. And that's what you kind of saw in the previous clip of the point that I got to. He was very willingly and easily sticking his head through it, but here he's more cautious. So you can kind of see he's got those like back feet sticky paws. I call them sticky paws. He's keeping those back feet on the go in case he needs to promptly leave the situation, which tells me that he's not comfortable with this. He's a little bit uncomfortable still, and that's okay, which is why we're working this up really slowly.
Ready?
Now, the things surrounding this training session, when I go to actually put a harness on him, I have a completely separate harness that doesn't require him to stick his head through. It actually just goes around his legs. I use a completely separate harness when I actually need to put a harness on him. It is not this harness. This harness is purely surrounded by positivity. We're working it up really slowly. And if I have to put a harness on him, he is either wearing just his flat collar on walks or I have a completely different harness. I would recommend that when you are working on this with your nervous dog that is nervous of the harness. Get 2 separate harnesses. The other thing that's really important is I'm using super high value food. I've got some ground beef that I'm using here. I was using chicken in the first clip in this video that you guys saw. Using high value food is just going to increase your dog's positive associations with the harness as well. Imagine if someone was handing you $100 bills for being next to the thing that you're scared of. For me, it's spiders. If my best friend was handing me $100 bills for just being in the presence of spiders, that would make me feel a little bit better about spiders, right? But on the flip side of that, if someone was handing me pennies, that's not going to do a whole lot. So high value food can be really helpful. Hopefully this was helpful as some initial first steps of how you can work with your nervous dog sticking their own head through a harness. We've got a long ways to go, but I wanted to make sure to show you guys these initial first clips. And as soon as you're done with your training session, that high value food goes away. So we can make sure we pair that with the harness. But yay, good job, Fenway. We'll keep working on it.
Find it. Good. Nice job, honey. Good boy. That's very good. Good job, Babs. Good boy. Perfect timing.